Hello, my name is Novarius, and today I'd like to talk to you about all things fantasy, and I use that term in the broadest of senses. Now, what I would like to do is create a series of videos talking about ways to inspire you to work on your own fantasy story, whether that's sci-fi or middle-aged fantasy. Doesn't matter. What does matter is that we focus on some general topics here, and we'll go more in depth on later videos. But we focus on some general topics. Like the first one I want to tackle in this video is technology. Technology is usually not really looked at too thoroughly. We generally, what we see in games and movies right now is very basic ideas or generic stereotypical ideas of, for instance, a middle-aged village. What does that have? What does that look like? um, an example would be a blacksmith. uh, generally speaking, when we think blacksmith, and if you've had any um, like if you've developed your ideas from movies and games, you would think, they make a lot of weapons, right? They make their living off making weapons. Well, do they? If we think about this a little bit more, what we'll actually realize is that that fighting bit that we see so often and that we do so often, that's actually not really the focus. Usually the focus is on just living. And for a blacksmith, what would what does everyone need from them throughout the year? Well, that's maintaining tools, making new tools, or pots and pans, and all these kind of things. And that is what I want to talk about. And that's something very specific. But when we look at technology in general, we can really draw out some very immersive characters where they actually need things that they uh, really need, and not just something generic. For instance, if you look at, let's say, a video game, World of Warcraft, at least it used to be this way. You would need, like, you talk to I don't know, a Skinner, and he'd give you a quest to get you 10 boar skins. Why? Don't know. That I understand why they did it. It's a video game, and they just needed a a objective. It doesn't really matter what. They just wanted you to have a way of to progress. Um, but I just wanted to emphasize that we can actually take a second look at what it means to be a Skinner. What does that entail? Is that the only job that they will do? I imagine not. I imagine that there would be hunting and leatherworking. That is kind of a combination of these things. And what I want to focus on is that if you dip your toe into that big pool of information that is out there, you can create some very interesting and immersive, if that's the word I want to use. I guess it is. Um, just characters or quest lines, or it all depends on what you're making, of course. But you can draw a lot from these little details within a world. Now, to put that into practice, how do you actually do that? Well, honestly, you can do it as simply as just Googling it. It's kind of like just looking it up. Just that's the only thing you need to do. Looking something up, something very simple. What does a maker of ships need? We look at that, right? We see that they need lumber, they need their tools. Well, what if they got some beef with the blacksmith who's making their tools, and they can't directly get it? So perhaps if you want to bring this to a game, very simple objective for a character, uh, go get these tools for me. Because I don't like the blacksmith, and it's the only one around, and I don't want to outsource because that takes way too long. I need these tools now so I can build the ship, so I can sell it, so I can be on my way, right? Something like that, right? That's just a generic, a very basic way to do some research about it, but actually look at what they need and then go from there. Now, if you, I kind of just thought of that, but if you were to actually do a very like just a basic Google search, Wikipedia, like even just one source, it's not necessarily accurate, but that's not what you need to go for. You need to find something you can build around, and that is what I wanted to bring with you. Of course, if you put more effort into it, if you think about it more, if you actually do more research and more accurate research, um, you will get far, far, far more uh, depths within these characters that you're making. And even the things you think you know, you should probably step back a little bit and look at what you're making. Um, Whether that's TV, a book, a game, doesn't really matter. Actually imagine the character that you're making and work with the notion that the technology that they have, does this make sense for them, right? So, for instance, their dress wear, right? Does that make sense for them to have that? It might sound a little obvious, but if I look at video games and movies and whatnot, I usually see that this is overlooked, and they are not necessarily um, in depth, and they're just something like stereotypical, and that's what I try to avoid, and that's why I wanted to make this video. It it was actually quite the effort for me, but I'm glad I got through it. I'm glad you sat through it, and for the next one, we'll focus on a very specific technology, not be so open. We had some examples, but I'll actually do a little research on the topic myself. Look at it. Like I'll try to take a little time just to show that with very little information, I will be able to give you a lot of different characters or story elements that I would otherwise just not have. So there you go. Anyway, I've been Ovarius. Hope you had a pleasant watch, and I'll see you tomorrow.